Um, well, I guess it's best to start with my father, John Lee Jefferson, who was born in Fort Valley, Georgia, and went into the service in World War One. His picture's over there, and he was discharged. I guess it was 1919, and he came here to Detroit. At that time, had their famous $5 a day line there. And he came here not knowing anyone on the train from Hartford, Connecticut after he was discharged, and landed down at Griswold and Michigan Avenue, and there was a police officer out in the intersection there, and they had these little stop signals that they turned at that time and mechanically operated. And my dad went up to him and said, where can a fellow get a job around here? He said, oh, you a veteran? He said, get on this streetcar and go on out to Ford. They're hiring out there. So he went out to Ford and was hired, and he had a job before he even had a place to stay. As a matter of fact, the fellow he met on the job out there, that's where he stayed that night. So he was the beginning of it. Well, what I really remember about Joe Louis is that on the nights that he fought, if you stepped out in the street, there was nothing, complete silence in the summertime. And as soon as he knocked out his opponent, you could hear these screen doors, these old wooden screen doors, and they had springs on them. You could hear plop, 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 as people were running out and running down to that corner, and cars were blowing their horns, people were screaming and hollering. They'd run down there on the corner, and you know, it was just like a New Year's. Yeah, that's whenever he wanted to fight, it's just like New Year's down there in Milford, you know. And, well, no, there weren't no TVs. They were on radios. As a matter of fact, you couldn't walk past a house without hearing the right to the left and the left to the right and that sort of thing, you know, coming through the windows in the summertime, no air conditioning. The windows were up, and so that's all you could hear. But in my mind, I could always hear those screen doors, plop, pop, 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 all down the lot. As people were running out and running down to the corner and screaming and hollering, and cars blowing their horns, you know, and it's just like a wedding procession going down Milford with cars blowing their horns and whatnot. It was quite a bustling street. It was the main commercial street for that area. You could get anything you wanted up and down Mill Street, no matter what, whether it was the clothing, or where you want to get a haircut, or your shoe repaired, everything, drugstore, everything was up and down Milford Street. Now, you always have a bunch of misfits in every neighborhood, and they were the Milford Street gang. Okay, and they call them that because it hang down there on the corner of my street, 30th and Milford, outside of Kruger's, which was an ice cream parlor. Okay, and the young girls used to like to come there, and all these no-good-nicks would hang around. The police would have to come and give me this corner, get away from here, whatnot, with the Milford Street gang. So when Joe Skaggs and my brother, I don't think my brother was in with the initial one. My brother's younger than I am, but he was in early on with the Milford Street gang. When they started having a luncheon with a bunch of the old fellows that they knew who graduated from Northwestern, they called it the Milford Street gang. One of those ones, and it was equivalent to capital punishment, was a child was number one, you didn't hit a woman. My dad, that was instilled in us early on. Do not hit a woman, do not touch a woman. If my sisters did anything, you come to me, and I'll take care of it. So that was instilled in us early, number one. Jobs around the house. I had to wheel coal into a coal bin around the side of the house and dump it. The coal man would come, dump a ton of coal out in front of the house. I had to shovel it and put it in a wheelbarrow, wheel it around the side and dump it down into the coal bin. Cut the grass. When the snows melted, I hated this. As soon as the snows melted, I had to turn up the dirt all around the fence. My mother loved flowers, and she was known as the flower girl. And as soon as the snows melted, I had to go all around the fence and turn up the soil around there. Now, my sisters had chores also in the house, you know, the washing of dishes and the ironing of clothes and all those things that we attribute to women. So you had your chores, you had things you had to do. And in those days, there was corporal punishment. You can't do that now. But that was a great persuader for a young person. Carl Jung started the Westsiders, okay? For me, all my life, it had bugged me as to what went on there. This was a small area bounded on the west by Epworth, okay? On the south by Warren. On the north, it would have been Tireman, and on the east by the Grand Boulevard. This was the initial area. They expanded a little bit later to go on out across the boulevard. But the people who moved in here bought these homes and started raising families, and their values were values of hard work, you know, and instilling that into their kids and education. Okay, so the genesis came from those initial persons who moved in the early 20s. Wingard Elementary School. I lived on 30th Street, and it was a dividing line for Sampson and Wingard. Those who lived on my side of the street, which was the east side of the street, went to Wingard. Those who lived on the west side of the street went to Sampson. So I knew everybody. I knew those people on my street, but I knew the people who lived on the in back of me toward Wingard School a lot more than I did the others. Wingard was a good school when I think about it, because we had courses for elementary school. We had what was called manual training, in which we had woodworking courses at that time. You know, we didn't get into metal work, but we did get into lathes, power tools, and that sort of thing at that time. And of course, the girls, they had their home economics type courses where they learned to sew and do those kinds of things. Besides the geography that we had, for example, I had geography there at Wingard, and I remember studying the Baltic states. And years later, I was in Toronto, and I was talking to a lady, and she said, "Oh, I'm from." You wouldn't want to know where I'm from. I'm from Estonia. You know, I said, "Estonia? Yeah, I know Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia." Now that popped up from elementary school, from the maps we had to color and whatnot of Europe. You know, the countries in Europe and the populations and what were their chief products and all that. All that occurred at Wingard.